Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Friday Night Drive Western Suburbs podcast, week 6. Wow, time's flying, Joel. I'm Josh Welge here with Joel Boenitz. We're taping this kind of a late night, 9 o'clock Tuesday night tape, but it's all good. We did a little volleyball today, did a little golf, but I think now I think it's time to talk football. How you doing, Joel?
I'm doing pretty good. Fun day of golfing today, or covering golf, dare say. I'm not much of a golfer myself, but yeah, it's a big week of football, week 6, and I'm really excited to start talking about it.
Yeah, I'm definitely not much of a golfer myself. I think I tried it one summer about 20 years ago, and I bought a set of clubs and I took a few lessons, and it was a miserable experience. So I admire the kids that can play it and play it well, as I admire the football players as well. But anyway, we're not a golf podcast; we're a football podcast. So let's talk some football. And Joel, boy, some wild finishes last Friday in week 5. A few of the games involving some of the teams we cover, the local teams. We'll talk about St. Francis in a minute because that kind of takes the cake. But man, St. Charles North, 2 touchdowns in a 37-second span. Did you see that result? And I feel like every year St. Charles North has at least one game like that, and it seems like Ethan Plum is in the middle of it. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty wild end to the game. I mean, you mentioned it, 2 scores in 37 seconds, both of them coming in the final minute of play against Wheaton Warrenville South. I mean, this was a game that, last year made it to overtime, and, there was a lot of hype heading into this game with 2 returning quarterbacks in Ethan Plum and Luca Carbonaro, and, it lived up to the hype. I mean, St. Charles North obviously cut the score to 32-30 with 51 seconds left, and then they recovered an onside kick, drove it down the field, that 18-yard touchdown to Braden Harms to secure the game for the North Stars. I mean, you can't get much crazier than that. It's their second big, comeback win this year, with week 1 win against Palatine being the first time. But I mean, wild game all throughout.
Yeah, I mean, there's no substitute for experience too, and they have a lot of both of those teams. You mentioned that a lot of experience at quarterback with those 2 quarterbacks. But Ethan Plum being a 4-year starter, he's got a lot of talent at wide receiver. He's got a really good running back. While maybe nobody expects a game like that, maybe they're the type of team that you think could do something like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they have the capability of doing it. I mean, it's or that St. Charles North team is, the only team to have taken Batavia 3 quarters, or to have a lead heading into the 4th quarter, and it took everything to beat them in that game against Batavia. So, I mean, St. Charles North is a really good team, and, they've shown time and time again, they're never out of a game, and, you know, they could be one to watch whenever it comes to playoff time in later this month in October.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually a really good and really thrilling finish for both St. Charles schools. I mean, St. Charles East, they were down at halftime. I think they might have lost their starting quarterback during the game, but they come back. They go to overtime. They win. They score on their first play of overtime. That's a really good win for them. I know, maybe they won't make the playoffs. Who knows how many wins they'll get, but wins like that are really, good wins for them as they're taking steps forward.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, St. Charles East is a really young team this year. I think I talked to head coach Nolan Posley after the win, and they only have 2 starters on that offense that are seniors. So it's a really good junior class that is really carrying that team. I mean, you mentioned JT Patron at quarterback, who is a junior and has kind of led the offense throughout this year. But all 4 of their I believe at least 3 of their wide receivers are juniors, with the 2 big ones being, of course, Shiko Jokai and also Peter Van Loo, who's been really good for them throughout these first 5 games. And then at tailback, Xander Salazar, also a junior, has had 300-yard rushing games and scored the game winner against Lake Park. It's one of 8 touchdowns that he's had to start Duquesne conference play. So, this is a team that, has shown that they have the basis to be a really good team. And with another year of experience heading into next year, they may be a team to watch for for the playoffs and maybe even a shot at the Duquesne conference title.
Now, I mentioned at the top that there were some crazy finishes, but unfortunately for St. Francis, I think their result with Providence, it takes a cake. I've never seen something like this or heard of something like this before. For those that are late catching up, St. Francis playing Providence, they Brady Palmer, St. Francis quarterback, had engineered 2 scoring drives in the fourth quarter. They took a 4-point lead. They get a 3 and out. Basically, there's a minute or so left. Basically, they're in victory formation, kneel down situation. Apparently, they were called for a delay of game penalty, which somehow got Providence the ball back. Granted, they only had 38 seconds left to make something happen. Well, they did make something happen. Their quarterback, AJ Rayford, connected with Jaden Mikulski on a 30-yard touchdown pass on the last play of the game. I've actually heard some people that told us that they've seen video of that they're not sure if that was a catch actually, but of course we're in high school football, so there's no replay in high school football. But St. Francis, that's a tough one. That's a tough pill to swallow to lose like that.
I think for any program, that's a tough pill to swallow. I mean, obviously, you have the victory right there, and to get called for a delay of game and then give the ball back and lose on the last play of the game that could have easily been preventable. It's just mind-boggling, crazy.
Yeah, no, I've never heard of something like that before in a game. But man, that's just a tough one to overcome. And then you're, on top of it, I mean, it's tough at any level, but you're talking about high school kids and kind of getting them reset emotionally and dealing with that. So, obviously a big challenge ahead for them. They play a very difficult schedule already, but to lose a game like that, their season has really been kind of a wild up and down season. I mean, they go up to Loyola to beat them. That's a huge win. They came back, they lost at home to St. Rita, then they lose that game. And now they play IC Catholic this week, who's, probably their biggest rival. So just a wild up and down for them. But yeah, that was definitely one for the memory bank, is that a lot of wild finishes last week. A game that was not a wild finish was a game that you were at last week. Batavia, every week it seems like they continue to impress. What were some of the things that jumped out about their 41-0 win over Wheaton North?
First off, I just want to say I've covered Batavia 3 times this year, and each game I've thought, oh, this is going to be a really close game. This is going to be really fun. And every single time, it's pretty much been a blowout, and I'm like, what the heck? But no, in this victory, the biggest thing for them has been the defense. The defense was just out of control in the entire game. I mean, they only held Wheaton North, who in the past 4 seasons has stayed just a touchdown away, or at least a 1 score away from winning the game. They held them to 21 yards of offense throughout the entire game. They finished with negative 13 rushing yards and only 35 or 30 passing yards. I mean, it was just insane to see the defense just basically putting pressure on every single play. They finished with 18 tackles for loss. I want to say they finished with 6 sacks, I want to say as well. It was just every single play, the defense was just making moves. And it was, it was insane to watch. And it really felt like a truly complete game by the defense. And especially after last week where they, or where they were trailing to St. Charles North for those first 3 quarters, whatever defensive coordinator Matt Holm told them in the locker room at halftime, apparently it's been working, because these past 6 quarters of football for Batavia, it's been really good in terms of defense.
Yeah, I mean, I know Matt Rodewald and Steve Susi, they do a podcast as well. During the week, Monday, and Matt said that he thinks this might be the best Batavia defense he's seen in a while, which is really saying something because they've had some exceptional defenses the last few years. You touched on Matt Holm, kind of interesting dynamic that you talked about in your King County Chronicle notebook this week. Longtime defensive coordinator, longtime teacher, now a retired teacher, still coaching defense. What did you find out about that?
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to Dennis Puron about it after the game, and he just pretty much looked at me and was like, "Now listen, for the first 13 years or for the first 12 years as being a defensive coordinator, he had to deal with teaching. What does he have to do now that he doesn't teach anymore? He's just a football coach all day, and it's fantastic. It's the best thing that's happened to us since I think it was Mike Gasperi, who was an offensive coordinator, since he retired from coaching and basically led the offense. And I mean, whatever it's just the philosophy that the players also have in following that defense, and the connection between the two has just been working perfectly so far. And I mean, like you said, and like Matt and Steve have said, it's probably the best defense that we've seen from Batavia in a long time. And that's saying something with the history that Batavia has had.
Yeah, definitely saying something. And I remember last spring, when I had heard that Matt Holm was retiring from teaching, and I was just kind of thinking, okay, well, he's going to retire as coach too, because I remember thinking to myself, that's a really big hit for that program because he's meant so much to what they do, coaching wise and defensive wise. But the fact that he's still coaching, obviously, maybe got a little bit more time on his hands to cook up some schemes. I mean, there's no surprise between his coaching ability and the talent that they have on defense that they're doing as well as they have. So a lot of good things going on with Batavia. We're going to talk about them a little bit more later in the podcast. It's kind of a big game coming up this week with Batavia. Wanted to kind of touch on the game that I was at last Friday. Oswego, like Batavia, improves to 5-0. They got tested. They're actually down 7-0 at halftime to Plainfield North. That's a game that they're a close rivalry. It seems like that game is always a game that goes down to the wire, no matter what. No matter the talent level for each of those teams. But as we were able to come back, get a 21-13 win, some big plays. Jeremiah Kane, who's a wide receiver defensive back going to Northern Iowa, he had a sack, forced a fumble, and then like 2 plays later, he caught a touchdown catch. So did some great things. And another noteworthy thing is Carson Cooney, linebacker going to Iowa. They actually put him in on offense a little bit. Did a little wildcat with a 6'3", 225-pound, kid coming straight at you. I mean, it was kind of like, all right, it was pretty obvious what they were doing. They're just going to put the ball in his hands, and he's just going to go right at him. But a good win for Oswego. I think they were a little upset because they felt like they really only gave two really good quarters. So it's one of those games that they were happy to get the win, but I feel like they're motivated to kind of show, that they're maybe a better team than they showed, because I don't think they're very happy with how they played in the first half. I mean, it was, last Friday was weird because with the wind and everything, I think some teams were maybe affected by it. Some passing games a little bit. I don't know. Did you notice anything from that? I mean, those were pretty wild conditions.
Yeah, it was definitely crazy. I mean, even in Wheaton, where it wasn't supposed to be as effective, you could really tell that the wind was blowing. I know in one specific play showed up for me on a Wheaton North punt. I believe it was their own 13-yard line, or somewhere within their own 15 or their own 15-yard line, somewhere in that range. The punter kicked the ball. It landed on their 40-yard line, and it did not stop rolling until it reached Batavia's 13-yard line. So
Wow.
that wind was moving that ball so much. And I mean, it affected, play a whole lot for both sides. But I mean, that wind was crazy everywhere in the state.
Yeah. It was that was one of the windier nights. I mean, that was definitely, I mean, we taped post-game reports, and I made sure to go to my car for that one because nobody was going to know what the heck I was talking about in the wind. So yeah, kind of a crazy night. Before we look at to the week 6 games, another really nice win last Friday. Talking about Nazareth beating Joy Catholic. The final was interesting final though. It was only 16-13. I mean, Nazareth is a team that I'm kind of growing accustomed to them really playing some really high scoring games, but winning with defense and holding to 13 points. I mean, they really got kind of lit up by Mount Carmel a few weeks ago. Their defense did, and the fact that they're able to hold Joliet Catholic to 13 points. I mean, that pretty good sign for Nazareth. I mean, they're a team that I know they can score points with Logan Malachek and the guys that he has at his disposal. But if their defense can play like that, that's a really good sign going forward. So a good win for Nazareth. Any other games from week 5 or any other wins that you were kind of struck like, yeah, that was a good win for a team?
I think we covered a lot of the big ones. I mean, one that kind of stood out for me was another team that we're going to be talking about later, Geneva versus Glenbard North. That game actually got off to a shocking start with Glenbard North taking a 9-0 lead into the second quarter. I mean, it took me for a surprise when I looked down at Max Preps and saw that result. I was like, what's going on? But then, of course, Geneva picked it up a little bit with 38 points to Glenbard North's 3 to end or throughout the second and third quarter. And, it took a little bit for them to get back on track. But, Geneva showed that they're still the explosive offense that we have known to come throughout this year.
And that leads us into week 6. And man, there are some doozy games this week in our area that I'm looking forward to. I mean, none bigger than the game that you're going to be at on Friday, Geneva Batavia. I believe it's the 106th edition of the rivalry. I mean, my goodness, that is a long rivalry. It's a pretty good football there. Batavia's really dominated that rivalry of late. I believe they won the last 13 games. I think I was at the game last year. There's been some really one-sided games in the last decade, but Geneva, I feel like they're closing the gap and closing the gap and closing the gap. And it was a very competitive game last year, a game that went into the fourth quarter, a game that Talon Taylor, if I'm not mistaken, he was hurting that. He got injured in that game, and he missed a significant amount of time afterwards. He's obviously back now. You've been able to kind of get a sense of both of these teams. What do you make of that game on Friday?
It's plain and simple. It's going to be one giant chess match throughout the entire game. I mean, you've got an explosive offense on Geneva that, takes or has drives that last probably no longer than 6 plays most of the time and finds the end zone very consistently. And then you've got a Batavia defense, which, like we've mentioned, is probably one of the best that we've seen from Batavia in years, that can stop plays and makes offenses shiver pretty much anytime they take the field. I mean, it's going to be so fun to watch and see what each team has planned in order to make sure that they can get around that other extremity on the other side. I mean, I talked to Coach Dennis Piron about the game. He said that this has a chance to be one of the best games ever played in the area. And, I talked to Boone Thorgerson as well, and he knows that, that defense is going to be something that, they need to play around. But either way, it's going to be such a fun game to watch. Whichever team you are rooting for, it's going to be fun to watch. Obviously, it's one of the greatest games in the area. Both teams have, their fans come out to that game. Batavia has the big advantage so far throughout this decade. Like you mentioned, they've won 13 straight. They're looking for 14, and they're looking to actually tie the series or the overall series in the next couple of years. They're currently Geneva currently has the overall lead 51-49 to 5.
Oh,
But
wow.
Thanks to that giant win streak that Batavia is on right now, if they get wins in the next two, they could tie up the series at 51 wins apiece. But this is probably one of the best chances that Geneva has to breaking that win streak from Dennis Piron.
Yeah,
And I'm just really excited.
it's definitely a series that's had its ebbs and flows over the year. I mean, there was a time where Geneva had the upper hand. Obviously, Batavia has, especially since Coach Piron took over. But this match, one of the things that strikes me is that Geneva seems like, they're a high flying offense. They really, can score a lot of points. I mean, their quarterback, Tony Chahino, he's been a revelation. I mean, because we were really wondering about their quarterback position coming into the year, and he's answered, all comers, and they have a lot of talent. I'm wondering if Batavia is going to try to play, the ball control game, running the ball. Sometimes when a really high powered passing type offense is not on the field for a long period of time, sometimes they kind of get out of sync just because they're not touching the ball. So I'm wondering if that sort of game plan of Batavia, that we're going to play really good defense, we're going to run the ball. Basically, we're going to be doing what we were doing really, really well the first 5 weeks of the season. So it's an interesting chess match. I agree. And on the other side, I mean, I'm sure Talon Taylor, I mentioned he was hurt in that last game, and he really did not have a great game against Batavia last year. I'm sure he wants to really go and show out. I mean, because this is next year he's going to be in Georgia, Alabama. Well, this is Georgia, Alabama in Kane County. So when these teams get together. So I'm very interested to see the impact that he has on this game.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he has momentum on his side as well. He just became Geneva's school record holder for the most receiving touchdowns in a career with 26. He broke that last week when he got his first touchdown, and then his second, and then his third. He's had three touchdown games so far this season. I have not seen one of them, so I think that might be a me thing, but we never know. But I mean, either way, we know how explosive Geneva's offense can be, whether they're using Talon Taylor or not. So if he's going to be used in this game, or if he's going to be double teamed, I'm sure we can expect to see explosive plays no matter what happens. And, like I said, this is going to be a super fun game to watch. And I'm so happy I'm going to be there.
Yeah, no, you're going to be, it's going to be a treat. All I'm going to say is just arrive early, please. I mean, tailgate, bring a grill, have a hamburger, stay there for a while. Definitely get there early because, man, parking is going to be at a premium Friday night. A game that I'm going to be at that I'm probably going to want to get there early as well. Downers Grove North at York, another matchup, 5-0, 5-0 in the West Suburban Silver. There's actually 3 teams left in the West Suburban Silver undefeated. Lyons Township is the other one. And so the next few weeks, those 3 teams are going to kind of really converge and really determine that league. But man, Downers Grove North has just, I mean, they have not been tested so far. We'll just put it that way. And part of that is to their credit. They've outscored opponents by a combined 208-14. They've just been great so far. I mean, I think their quarterback, Owen Lansu, going to Minnesota, I mean, he's probably played like a half in each game. Their defense has been tremendous. But I'm interested to see. This has been a test because I've said it before in this podcast that York the last couple of years has kind of emerged as kind of like the new power in that conference, kind of taking it away from Glenbard West, although they did share the title last year. Now I think maybe it's Downers Grove North's turn. I mean, they got the quarterback, they got the great defense. But we'll see. I'm not going to take it away from York. I like York's quarterback, Bruno Masso, a lot. Their defense is good. They got a good running back in Henry Duda. It's going to be a fourth quarter game, I think. I'm really, really looking forward to that one. I've got a chance to see York already this year. Haven't got a chance to see Downers Grove North live yet. I honestly don't think I've seen Owen Lansu live in a game. No, I take that back. I saw him beat Glenbard West last year. That was a big moment. But really looking forward to seeing him. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the state of junior. That should be a fun one. Looking forward to that one.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like you mentioned, it's the battle of 5-0 teams, and with great quarterbacks and great defenses on both sides. I mean, it's going to be super interesting to see who's going to come out on top, who's going to have the better defense, and who's going to have the better quarterback play, or just offense in general. And like you mentioned, this is probably going to be one of the games that decides who's going to win that conference. And anytime there's a game that determines the conference, it's going to be a super fun game to watch.
Yeah, and I'm always interested to see, a team like Downers Grove North that were 5 games into the season and they just really have just flattened every team they played. I mean, how are they going to do when they're in a fourth quarter game on the road at a team like York? Are they just going to continue to roll and maybe maybe they're a notch better than what I thought they were going into the season, because they were pretty darn good last year. They got to the 7A state championship game, but so far they're looking like a team that might be at least as good as that team last year. But yeah, this will be a nice one. Downsgrove north of York, going to be on there on Friday. Another game actually in Elmhurst as well, I do believe. St. Francis playing IC Catholic. This is a really big one. These are two teams that have been mainstays in the playoffs. They've made deep runs in the playoffs. Means, IC Catholic, they've won a few state titles. St. Francis has got deep in the playoffs, but right now St. Francis is sitting 3-2. IC Catholic is sitting 2-3. And in that Chicago Catholic League, there's some tough games down the road. This is a game that, I hate to call it a playoff game in week 6, but it's pretty close to a playoff game for these two teams. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, I think this is a must-win game for both programs. Obviously, you talked about it. St. Francis, they started off the season 3-0, but of course, that blowout or that last-second loss to Providence Catholic last week, and then kind of a blowout loss to St. Rita, 31-13. It's kind of slowed down the momentum for the Spartans, and if they want to get that confidence back, especially as they head into the latter half of the season, this is a must-win game for them, especially if they want to have a chance, later down the line against a team like Nazareth. And for IC Catholic, it's just been kind of been a slow start, dare say. 3 straight losses to SICP, Nazareth, and Marist are obviously not the best thing. And they're definitely going to need to get this win if they want to continue, or if they want to try and get back into the playoffs this year. So overall, I think this is a must-win game for both teams.
Yeah, IC Catholic, they're going to be one of those teams that if they sneak in at 4-5, they're going to be that 16 seed that every 1 seed is like, oh crap, we had them in the first round. They're going to be the 4-5 team that nobody wants to see. Similar to Nazareth, I believe it was last year when they played Prairie Ridge in the first round, and it was like, oh god, they're the team that we have to face in the first round. But first they have to get there. Even after this week, they got Marmion left. That's no pushover. They got St. Viator left. They're good. St. Rita is really good. And then you look at St. Francis. They still have DePaul Prep, who's 4-1. They got Nazareth waiting for them in week 9. So, yep, both of these teams, I think they definitely want to get a win this week. And on top of it, it's a huge rivalry. Going back a few different leagues. They've been in a few different leagues the last several years, but they continue to be big rivals. So, looking forward to that one. It should be a fun game. Should be a game that goes down to the wire, I would expect. Another game that I'm just going to say this is probably going to be a playoff game in week 6 in the West Suburban Silver. I know the big one that I'm going to be on Friday night, but on Saturday afternoon, Glenbard West, who got their first win last week to 1-4 against Leiden. They play Hinsdale Central, who's 2-3. Hinsdale Central is a team that they've kind of hung around against some really good teams. They were within a touchdown against York. They were within a touchdown against Lyons Township. They played Naperville Central pretty tough. They beat Bolingbrook. They've been close. They just haven't quite been able to punch through, but they're 2-3. Glenbard West is 1-4. I think if either of these teams can somehow get to 4-5, they're in a decent chance to be one of those 4-5 teams. But first, you got to get to those 4 wins, and one of them's 2-3, and the other one's 1-4. They need to have this win on Saturday. This is sort of an early playoff game for both of those teams.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, Glenbard West getting that 63-0 win against Leiden last week, it was definitely a huge momentum booster, especially after 4 straight losses to start the season. But Hinsdale Central, it's going to be a big game for them because after that they face Provincia West and Oak Park, and Oak Park's no pushover, and we saw that. But I think it's going to be a big win for them just to make sure that they get to at least 5 wins because they got Downsgrove North at the end of it. And we mentioned 4-5. 4-5 is still no guarantee that you can make it into the playoffs. So getting to the 5-win threshold is going to be huge for Hinsdale Central. And if they get that this week, or if they get this win this week, it proves, or it gets them a pretty smooth sailing through 5 wins, or at least I would hope. But I mean, Glenbard West, we've been talking about it all year. This is such a huge stretch for them over these next 5 weeks. Obviously, they got that win against Leiden, helps jumpstart that big start that they need. But I think a win against Hinsdale Central is going to be so necessary in order for them to make their case to make it to the playoffs this year.
Another big game in the sort of the northwest area of Illinois. I'm not really even sure. I've never been there. Richmond Burton. Sandwich is playing at Richmond Burton in the KRC. A very interesting matchup. Richmond Burton's really been the class of that league for the last several years. But Sandwich, after an 0-2 start, they're really coming on. They've won 3 in a row. They're getting that defense together. They got that wing tee really humming with multiple running backs. That is going to be a game that could very well decide that league. I'm really going to be keeping an eye on what's going on in Richmond Burton. I mean, definitely want to keep an eye on that. That's a big game for Sandwich. A lot of good games on Friday. We didn't even talk about Wheaton Warrenville South is playing Wheaton North. St. Charles North is playing St. Charles East. Joel, before we get out of here, just your thoughts going to week 6. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Man, it's rivalry week, and this week is going to be so fun to watch throughout the entire area. And I'm so excited to see how some of these games are played out on Friday or Saturday for your case as well. But it's going to be so fun to watch all around the league, and you definitely want to tune in.
Yeah, definitely will. Reminder, everybody, that I'll be back here tomorrow. I'm going to be taping with Steve Susi as we do a look ahead to week 6 around the state. And then Matt Rodel will be here on Friday night from 9:30 to 11 for our Friday night live stream with scores, highlights, game reports, hopefully from a not a very windy Friday night, and their kind of breakdowns. So you definitely want to stay tuned. Again, before we get out of here, my name is Josh Welge with Joel Boenitz. Joel Boenitz, thank you for joining us. You have a good Tuesday evening.